Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to our third winter webinar for this year, which is Get the Latest Rub on Rabbits. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm sitting today, which is the Gunai people. They took very good care of this country for a long time, and unfortunately, rabbits, amongst other things, have given us more challenges, and certainly them more challenges than we would hope. If you would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which you're sitting today, please do pop that in the chat function. We always like to see where you're coming from and also acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging from the country where you are today. We have a jam-packed agenda this morning. So before we start and I throw to the first presenter today, I'd like to invite you all, if you do have questions, if you feel free, unmute yourself and ask. All the presenters are happy for you to ask questions throughout their presentations. Otherwise, if you could just pop your question in the chat function, Caroline and myself will keep an eye on that and also interrupt at a salient time. For those of you who are just joining now, we are recording this, so please let us know if you have any issues with that. We will be uploading it to our website in the next couple of weeks and sending you the link to that, as well as any of the useful resources that our guest presenters talk about today. So if you missed jotting anything down, don't worry, we'll send that through to you in the next couple of days. Alrighty, so without further ado, I will introduce Tim Bloomfield, who is one of the long-standing mentors from Victorian Rabbit Action Network. He'll be talking to you about who's responsible for rabbit management and what is the go with the Conservation and Land Protection Act. All right, Tim, if I can invite you to unmute yourself and go.
Okay, thanks very much, Jody. That is what I'll be talking about, the good old CALP Act and community responsibilities, etc. I suppose I'll do the first bit, which is share the screen. And there we go. We've got a shared screen there, have we? Yes, we have. Excellent. So the Catchment Land Protection Act of 1994 is very similar in regards to the very first acts that were about rabbits, which were Vermin Acts in the 1860s, and that was the result of community demand that something be done about rabbits. And it was felt that the first thing that should be done was to have a legislative responsibility for all persons on their land to do things about rabbits. And by the time we get to 1994, we've got a Catchment Land Protection Act that specifies particular tasks and responsibilities of land managers. And it is to prevent the spread of and possibly eradicate established pest animals. Well, eradication is a difficulty, and we'll talk about that later, or others will indeed. But it's important to realise that the Act is there because that is what people wanted. That's what the community of Victoria wanted. They wanted to be able to have a process that could enforce and result in people understanding their responsibility as an individual land manager. And it applies to all public and private land in Victoria, except Commonwealth land, because they're in, it's a different act. But the issue that we've got always with rabbit management is the issue of who should take up the tasks of doing that. And when we consider the impact of rabbits, and that'll be spoken about a number of times today, but it's very, very significant. With 1 to 3 rabbits per hectare stopping the regeneration of many native species, and rabbits being a key food source for foxes and feral cats. And with the opportunity, which we've seen from those very first introductions in the 1859, good old Thomas Austin, rabbits disperse So any rabbit that's on your land has arrived from somewhere else. And the likelihood of all your rabbits dying tonight, and if that happened, is that the next rabbit would come in. So rabbits are across the landscape, and they are across all land classes, and they are the species which is going to have the most significant impact. And because of this, the responsibility of doing land management involves all of those people who share the problem. And that problem is shared across land, public and private. One of the things that we know about rabbit management is how to manage rabbits properly, but often it's not done in that way. And the result is rabbits respond quickly and rapidly. In fact, increases of over 206% can occur from poor rabbit management. If you do that work just on your land and your land alone, then the likelihood is that rabbits will come into your property. If you're not doing rabbit control, you're spreading rabbits to others. If you work with others, then you have the opportunity of doing rabbit control, which is your responsibility, but can have a community impact across the landscape. So it'll be spoken about the particular recipe for rabbit control, and a particular site here in near Balan, where there are over 160 rabbits, a spotlight kilometre and 1,600 warren systems. Best practice was put into that landscape, and then with the community, a tree planting program occurred to change that landscape. And that's what's possible when people work together. So you've got a legislative responsibility, but the real responsibility is that to those others who share your landscape. So that's about it, Jody, from me in regard to who's responsible. But I'm sure there'll be questions in regard to roadsides and other things.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Tim. We've got about 10 minutes for questions for Tim, and I'm sure Neil and Aaron will be sharing more, and certainly Ina will be talking about the viruses just next up. But in the meantime, does anybody have any questions relating to land tenure responsibilities process around that? I'm hearing crickets.
I can go a question, Jody.
Sure, Michelle.
Thanks, Tim. It's really informative. You mentioned about like the Commonwealth land, and it sounded like I just didn't quite catch what you said there. I wonder if you could just elaborate a bit on that one.
So the nature of the structure of laws is that a state law is not enforceable on Commonwealth land. In the regard to land management, the Commonwealth is not covered by the Catchment Land Protection Act. Being a good neighbour, they generally do things, but they're not covered by the Catchment Land Protection Act.
Okay. And what's an example of Commonwealth land?
Oh, defence land would be that.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Michelle. Great question. Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, Beth's got her hand up. Lovely,
Brilliant.
Beth.
Hello there. I wondered if you could just talk a little about a bit about the tree planting as a response to rabbit inundation. How that works. It might be a bit of a Dorothy Dixer, but I just quite like to have it on record as how that works.
So what in the situation which I spoke about here in the pictures that I put up, that community tree planting was able to occur because all the rabbit burrow systems have been mapped. The rabbits were baited. There was a 94% reduction in rabbit numbers following that, and the 1,600 warren systems were treated effectively with bulldozers and excavators. That's what then enabled the tree planting to occur. But the important thing there is that those trees that were planted back in about I think it was late 2010, that there now had, well, last time I looked at in 2020, plants that are the result of that. So there's been natural regeneration occurring from that. So then that's changing the landscape and habitat for native species.
But the rabbit treatment needed to be done beforehand.
Absolutely. Now, if what we've done is simply, if we've done nothing and put trees in guards there, the rabbits would have pruned them, the rabbits would have pushed under the guards, the rabbits would have, I know of a site at the moment where, because that rabbit management wasn't done properly, there's about a 70% loss of plants that are palatable to rabbits.
Mm.
So you've got to do the management, which is reduce rabbit numbers to as low numbers as possible, which really is ensuring there's no burrow systems in order to be successful.
That's a great point, Tim, and this is amazing looking at the difference in these pictures. I'm wondering, how many rabbits does it take? So on a landscape like this, how low do you have to go with numbers before you will have successful tree planting and regeneration?
Yeah, the aim in this landscape was to have no active burrows. That's what we tried to do. Now, that resulted in rabbit numbers, the reduction from about 1,600, 160 rabbits a spotlight kilometre to less than one. What's happened there is that then the natural regeneration that's come from those trees that were planted is able to survive. So, just on that very basis, I would suggest, you're aiming for something less than one rabbit a spotlight kilometre.
Thanks, now, Tim, sorry.
Hmm.
Does anyone else have any questions while we've got Tim online?
Hi, I was just wondering, are these principles useful for hares as well?
So with hares, given they don't have burrow systems and the breeding of hares is very, very different to rabbits. They usually only have one litter. The only method really involved with hare management is to exclude them using like rabbit-proof fencing or guards that they can't reach over. There's no registered baits for hares, and it comes down to shooting of all the things you can do, which can be quite effective because you don't tend to get, not these days anyway, you don't tend to get plagues of.
Thanks for that, Cass. Great question.
There's some research out in New Zealand that 1080 baits can be used on hares. Zip is doing hare eradication in the Central Otago basin.
Yeah, look, if in any baiting program, any large-scale baiting program, we probably pick up a hare, particularly using carrot bait. But in Victoria, there's no registered method.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I'll refer that to as there's no legal method of poisoning hares in Victoria. But look, that's a really good point that you made about New Zealand. That's very interesting.
Thanks for sharing that. I'll ask if I think we've got time for one or two more questions from Tim, and then we'll throw to Ina from CSIRO, who'll be talking about virus research. All good. Okay. Thank you so much, Tim, for that. It's certainly amazing to see what can happen and the repair that can be achieved when you've got a successful control program. Obviously, you can't eradicate them from the landscape, and it's an ongoing issue. If I can ask you to stop sharing your screen, Tim, and I will introduce Ina Smith from CSIRO, who will be sharing sharing what's going on in the research world and viruses.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen and then I'm going to start my presentation. Hold on one moment. Okay. There, and I'm hoping you see my screen now with the presentation on it.
Oh, good. Thanks, Emma.
Oh, good. Okay. I'm coming from the lands of the Ngunnawal people, and so I'm going to share the photo with you. And this is a photo of City Hill, which is right in the middle of Canberra. And as you can see, this is before they did some rabbit eradication, and you can see lots of rabbits there. Slide. So I'm going to talk today about our approaches to rabbit biocontrol and to give you a bit of a history of the initiatives over time. So initially, because of the introduction of rabbits, the first biocontrol that was used was myxomatosis, and that was in around 1950. And then fleas were introduced to help with the transmission of the myxoma virus, and that led to the decrease of rabbits. Then there was another introduction of rabbit fleas in the 90s, followed by RHDV1, or rabbit hemorrhagic disease virus 1. Now, to give you a bit of a background on rabbit hemorrhagic disease virus 1, there are two types, 1 and 2. 1 kills adult rabbits, where RHDV2 kills young rabbits, adult rabbits, and hares. So it's not quite as specific. RHDV2 virus also overseas kills other lagomorphs, such as cottontail rabbits and that kind of thing. So we also in Australia have a benign calicivirus present called rabbit calicivirus, and it doesn't kill rabbits. So over, and then in the 90s we had RHDV1 introduced, and RHDV2 appeared in the landscape, and it led to what is estimated to be a reduction of about 60% of rabbit numbers. So the combined economic benefits over this time has been estimated to be about $70 billion to agriculture over 60 years. And this is a figure, an older figure, okay? And currently it's thought that the losses due to rabbits is around $239 million a year. And as Tim has mentioned, rabbits also have that, they're a keystone animal. They sustain populations of rabbits, of foxes and cats. So our rabbit biocontrol pipeline has 4 points: optimizing the viruses we currently have, discovering new viruses, new pathogens of rabbits, selecting better strains for existing viruses, and then long-term looking at novel genetic biocontrol of rabbits. So I'm going to talk to you about our monitoring activities, and I've got this photo here, and if you have a look at the first rabbit's ear, is what looks like a dirty patch, is actually fleas, and I'm told the fleas synchronize their life cycle to the pregnant rabbit, so that there's lots and lots of them when the rabbit gives birth to the young ones, so that they can then populate the young rabbits. So we've been doing rabbit calicivirus monitoring in Australia for about 10 years now. And so this process involves where if you find a dead rabbit, not a shot rabbit, but dead rabbit, you can submit a sample to us via Rabbit Scan on the Rabbit Scan app, or via a direct submission. There's the link, but I've also provided that link to Joe. Or you can Google us on calicivirus CSIRO rabbits, and you'll find us. So we've received over 3,000 samples over that time. We've received them all this year. And we can see this is a map of the samples that were received over that time, and we've detected 6 different variants. So what happens is the virus can do what's called recombination, which is they will pick up part of the genome of from rabbit calicivirus, and in that case, in some cases, it may be to the advantage of them and lead to more replication and better spread. So our submissions from the last year for RHDV sampling or calicivirus sampling, we require liver. We have tested 256, and of those, 101 have been positive, so nearly a 40% infection rate we're detecting. We also test for myxoma virus or myxo, and that sample that is required is an eyelid, not liver, because the eyelid is packed full of the pox virus, which myxoma is a member of. So if you submit liver, it doesn't get tested, so it's eyelid only. And we've tested 17, and 5 have been positive. For our myxoma samples, we have a collaboration going with Kendup Patel at University of Adelaide, and we collaborate with him, share the samples, and his project involves doing some testing. Here's an example on our website. We give information out about where we're detecting viruses, whether it be myxoma, RHDV2, or K5. And so you can see we get, like for the month of February, we had some from Western Australia, Tassie, Victoria, New South Wales, and a combination of myxoma as well as RHDV2. So we had, in this month, we had 2 samples from Tasmania for myxo. The latest month, last month, we had samples from Western Australia, New South Wales, Victoria, and Queensland, and had a positive in Queensland. So generally in the winter months, we get less submissions. RHDV2 is active all year round, but yeah, because of winter months, there's less vectors around, the flies, the mosquitoes, whatever, to transmit onwards, and therefore there's less activity. Here's an example of our results over time. So in 2007, we had started out, there was lots of RHDV1. Then over time until now, we basically have it where it's only RHDV2 and the recombinant called 4C. So as you can see, this recombinant is dominant in that landscape. Another thing that we have done is what we've called bioprospecting or pathogen discovery, and we've done onshore, that's here in Australia, as well as working with collaborators overseas. So a third of our rabbit samples that come in are negative for RHDV and myxoma virus, and so the question was, what's killing these rabbits, and can we use, or that can that pathogen, if we find a pathogen, be exploited for rabbit control purposes? So to do that, we do what's called NGS, or next generation sequencing, where we extract the RNA, the total RNA, and from those animals that have died that are RHDV positive, and we sequence it. And so in this run, we sequenced 48 domestic rabbits, and therefore we can determine, is there any RNA viruses, is there any DNA viruses, because the replicating part becomes RNA, and can we also able to detect any transcriptionally active pathogens, whether they be bacteria, fungi, or parasites. And through this process, we detected, for the first time in Australia, hepatitis E virus. And in that little bit there is the viruses that clustered with known hepatitis E viruses from rabbit species. And we screened our rabbit tissue database and found a bit over 3% prevalence. We then developed a serological assay and was able to determine prevalence. So in domestic rabbits, it was a bit over 11% and 9% in wild rabbits, and generated near genome, complete genomes. But the issue is with hepatitis E, it's potentially zoonotic in that it can infect humans as well. So this does not make a good biocontrol agent. So we then went tested offshore, and we had collaborators in Chile as well as collaborators in the US. So in Chile, we discovered that they had a new benign rabbit calicivirus that we didn't know about before. And from the collaboration from US scientists, from their silver lager species, such as the cottontail ones, we discovered a new hepacivirus. So hepaciviruses are in that family of hepatitis C virus. But we were unable to identify any immediate candidate pathogens that we could use as future biocontrols. But we continue to monitor what's happening overseas for outbreaks of rabbit disease, and if there's a rabbit disease occurring, we'll look towards it and evaluate that as a potential control agent. For our current research, what we've been doing is developing an organoid system. So up until this development of this organoid system, the rabbit caliciviruses such as RHDV 1 and 2 could only be grown in rabbits. And so that limits what you can do about studying the virus and growing the virus. So what we do is we take the liver from a wild rabbit. We work in with the local shooters and rangers to scavenge tissues, and then we put it in a cell culture system, which is a 3D cell culture system. So they're like little domes. We use like little domes, and so the cells that like being in the inside of the dome migrate there, and the ones that are on the outside migrate to the outside. So initially we started out and we had 5% of our cells being able to be infected. And this picture here shows what we do is we do a staining system where we fix the cells and then we add an antibody and then probe it with a fluorescent antibody. And so that greenish that you see is a virus, indicates the virus growing in the cell. So we started at 5%, and that we've determined wasn't really good enough to accomplish what we wanted to do. And so what we did was we used a interferon inhibitor. And an interferon inhibitor, what it does is it shuts down the mechanism that the cell has to control viruses. So these cells have now, with the addition of what we call magic dust, no ability to control the virus. So the virus is able to grow, and we've got the virus growing to up to 80% in our cells. So another thing that we're able to do is do species specificity testing. So one of the questions that was asked of RHDV2 was because it infects not just rabbits, but infects other lagomorphs. Is there a possibility that it's also infecting foxes and cats and other predators? So we made some liver organoids from rabbits, hares, mice, cats, and foxes to ask that question. And we found that the infections mirrored what we thought. So RHDV1 was only able to infect rabbits, RHDV2 rabbits and hares. So this system can be used to do species specificity testing if need be. So what we're currently doing is what we call RHDV accelerator. So we're trying to make the next biocontrol agent and select for what we call immune escape mutants or neutralization escape mutants. And in this process, we incubate virus and antibody together so that the antibody neutralizes the virus, and any virus that isn't neutralized will grow. And then we passage this on and on. So the advantage of this is we can we've got a platform where we can use it for repeated use, and so hopefully stay one step ahead, and it's non-GM or non-genetically modified. This is kind of the timeline. So at the moment we're in phase 1, and we've got some funding from DAF to start this processing. So prior to this, our funding has been from MLA, and we're at the moment attempting to develop our first virus variant, and then we'll characterize it. So at this point we'll have a stop go, and then so if we've developed something that we think is viable, we'll then go on and register it and get approval through APVMA for a rollout. So this whole process is probably going to take about 10 years, estimated. The other thing that we did was do an economic assessment. So I'm going to be quite quick on this. So basically this red line is the cost if we did nothing. And then the yellow line is if we did a first release, and then like, say 10 years later, did a second release and a third release. So each release drives the population downwards. And so for the economic assessment, they talk in terms of net present value, which is a method to assess the profitability of an investment, and they calculate the present value of your cash flows, where the inputs, the cost of the farmers of controlling rabbits, and the outputs, and they subtract that from the initial investment, and that tells you if it's worthwhile investing. And the other value they use is a benefit cost ratio, and that evaluates the benefit of your investment. So a BCR, or benefit cost ratio, of greater than 1 means that the benefits are expected to outweigh the costs, and therefore makes it a potentially more worthwhile investment. So we've done 2 different modeling exercises. One where there's a self-spreading biocontrol, so a really good biocontrol where you release it and it spreads onwards, and in that kind of scenario, it's nearly a 100-to-1 benefit cost ratio, and if you adjust the risks, it's closer to 60-to-1. So risks, we took into account a lot of risks that have been used in previous reports, and they're things like uptake of the biocontrol, if there's any political reasons, and a whole set of other risks. For a new biocide, if it was just a biocide, that's where it's just a local knockdown, the benefit cost ratio declines significantly down to 4-to-1 for when you take into account risks. And then I'm going to finish with the considerations for rabbit biocontrol. So rabbit biocontrol is not a silver bullet. It needs to be released at the right time. So for the current one that's used, which is RHDV1, you shouldn't release it when there are young around, because your timing is important. If you're releasing them with young around, the young are not susceptible. So what you're doing is you're vaccinating those rabbits. They will survive the release and they will grow on to be immune rabbits. RHDV1, 2, they're transmitted by the fecal oral route, but they're also transmitted by insects, so flies, mosquitoes, and fleas. So again, timing is important. If there's a lot of flies and that around, that's a good time, because the flies will land on a deceased rabbit and then transmit it onwards. And this is next point's really important. Biocontrol has to be part of an integrated pest management. You just can't release a biocontrol and do nothing. You have to follow it up with the other things that I'm sure the other presenters will present about. And And then lastly, sometimes the biocontrol shouldn't be released. Sometimes it's not a good time to release it. Like if there's lots of young around, if there's high immunity, it's just not a good time. Then lastly, I'm going to give a thank you to, this is the team that's been involved in all this work. So thank you. I'm going to stop sharing and get there.
Wow.
So do we have any questions? I hope I've covered enough.
Thank you, Ina. That is certainly an incredible insight into the amount of work that goes into finding biocontrols that actually do the job. I certainly wasn't aware of just how complicated it is.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a few others online who are similarly surprised. Does anyone have any questions, Ina?
Jody, I can't put my hand up. I can't see where to do that, but I'll just chime in as you can hear anyway.
Yep.
One of the things I know that we at VRAN are observing, and the message we're getting out there, is that since RHDV2 and RHDV K5 are so widespread across Victoria, they're basically endemic, just like COVID is. And our pitch is that it's really a waste of time if you spend time and money trying to release it when it's already there. And like you were saying before, the timing is absolutely critical for the reasons you mentioned, one of which, of course, is getting it to spread. So if you release it when there are no flies around or other vectors, then effectively you've just totally wasted your time.
Yep, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And that's where it's like, it's not a good time to release biocontrol, but you've got other things in your arsenal that you should be doing.
Yeah, and Aaron's going to talk lots about that.
Thanks, Neil. Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, me. I've got questions. Ina, you mentioned that there's a benign calicivirus.
Yep.
Does that mean that there's an active one as well as a benign one out there? Because a lot of people talk about calici.
Yeah, so there's a calicivirus that doesn't cause death, and it's been here for a long time. And it was first discovered when they released RHDV1, and they expected it to have a bigger impact and were wondering why it didn't. And then they took some blood samples, and they found that there were antibodies to this benign calicivirus, and that can impact on how the virus is spread. So that's probably been in Australia as long as the rabbits have been there. And
is that? Sorry.
I was going to say, and it serves as to be a recombinant, to be the basis. So our current RHDV2 that's been dominating the landscape has evolved from what originally came, and it has recombined with the benign one, and it's spreading very nicely throughout. For instance, New Zealand have an RHDV2 over there, but it doesn't spread nearly as well as our one. Okay.
So I also had a question around, I guess the encouragement is for the purposes of research for people who are coming across the dead rabbits to do that collection and send in the samples. Yep. But you mentioned that there's that hepatitis E. How would we protect ourselves from that if we are going to be sending in samples?
Okay, so you'll get, if you want samples, you'll get in contact with us. We send you out a kit, and in that kit contains a pair of gloves. Okay, so
easy.
Just normal PPE will help you. Okay,
yeah.
So yeah, you'll just take a bit of liver sample with your gloves on and then get rid of your gloves. So that's as simple as that. And
the eyelid sample, is that literally a sample of an eyelid?
Yeah, because myxoma makes puffs out the eyelid of the rabbit. It's very noticeable. And so you just take off a bit of eyelid.
Wow,
and,
there you go.
and put it in a tube. We give you, so it's a different collection process.
Yeah. We've also got a question from Tammy in the chat. Are rabbits, Tammy, do you want to chime in and ask that, or happy to go for me to read that out? Yep, Tammy's online. Yep.
Hey, it's about hunting them for food. You know, if any of these diseases are affecting rabbits, can people still hunt them and eat them?
Yeah, well, with RHDV virus, it will generally kill rabbits within 2 days. So it doesn't infect humans, so you could eat them. Okay, but I think if you've got a rabbit that's infected with RHDV, it's going to be poorly. It won't be hopping around a lot. Okay.
Can I add to that too, please, Ina, in the sense that a part of the AVPMA approval process is it's transferable to humans, and if it is, then obviously it's not going to be approved. But the other thing, to make people feel comfortable, if you look at my bald head and grey beard, you'll probably realise I've been chasing and eating rabbits for a long, long time. And in all of my time, I've never heard of anyone dying from myxoma. So fortunately, that hasn't killed anybody either. So yeah, I think you're pretty safe in terms of the diseases rabbits might have and hunting and eating them, as I still do.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. I'm just keeping an eye on time for everyone. If you do have more questions for Ina, please pop them in the chat and we'll get those questions to her and the answers back to you all. In the meantime, we might move on and invite Aaron Stevens, who is one of the newer mentors with Victorian Rabbit Action Network, and Aaron also works with Bass Coast Landcare Network, so he's been doing work for a long time also. Aaron.
Okay. All right, I'll share my screen here. So hopefully you can all see that. Jump in here. All right, can you see that one?
Perfect, thanks, Aaron.
Perfect. Whoops. All right, let's move a bit out of the way. Okay. As Joe mentioned, I work for VRAN and for the Bass Coast Landcare Network, and I'll be talking all about the components of a successful management program for rabbits and what that looks like. So let's jump in. So general components for success. So you'll see I've got this photo on the left-hand side here. I don't know how quick you all are at counting, but each of these dots is an active rabbit warren. There's about 400 here. So this is a site out near Reef Island, if you know it, on the Bass Coast. So the different colours are just different properties. Obviously a very, very significant problem. So this leads into my first point of what I want to achieve. Is it possible with this kind of problem to achieve 0 rabbits? And is that something that we're going to be able to do? And the answer is no with this situation. As Tim was touching on, with a landscape scale problem, you're always going to have rabbits coming in from other places. So in the sense of this problem, what we wanted to achieve was 0 active warrens. So that's what we did, is we went out and we discovered how bad the problem was. And looking at this map, it was pretty bad. So how you can't measure how successful you were if you don't know where you started from, and that all comes down to what you want to achieve. So with this one, we had to engage all of our stakeholders and landholders. So there were multiple different landholders here. The foreshore area was Parks Victoria as well. So it was about lining up all those ducks in a row. Your timing of control is really important as well, along with how many methods of control. So that is what we talk about when you hear integrated pest animal control. And the basis of that is generally the more different things that you're doing, the greater your success is going to be. And again, this comes back to legal requirements and licenses. Have you ticked all of those off as well? So this, I suppose, this is the golden formula of rabbit control, so to speak. So we have our pre-control monitoring, like I spoke about. So this could be like we did for this project. Your warren count, active warren count. This could be a measure of rabbit damage on plants. This could be a spotlight count of rabbits as well. You move then into your population reduction technique. So this can be done a number of ways. You can bait, you can fumigate, you can coordinated shoot. Ideally, you're doing as many of these things as you can within that landscape. Then we move on to the warren ripping and collapsing. And as Tim was touching on earlier, this is a really, really important point. This is what's going to give you your long-term control, which I'll talk about in a minute. After that, you need to come back, have a look. You need to do another round of control. Were you successful? And you need to go back and do all of your post-control to measure how successful you were. So we're just going to sort of cover off all these methods. So we're going to start with our population reduction, and we're going to start with baiting here. So this is useful as a population reduction tool. So you can use Pindone or 1080 in Victoria. They both work in a different way, and I've got another slide that we might be able to show a bit later with the differences here. But as Tim was mentioning with his site, I think he had 95 or 94% reduction, so it can be really, really effective. You can have off-target damage without precautions. The reason that these come with a label is so that you reduce these as much as possible. On the left-hand side at the bottom here, hopefully you guys can see we've got a little rabbit cage here. That's an exclusion cage to stop wallabies getting into this one and consuming the bait. And we can see that this rabbit had no issues getting in there. And this is at top photos at the same site where we've got green rabbit dung after consuming the Pindone, which is dyed a green colour. Your best timing for this one's going to be around summer in drier conditions, the reason being that there's less feed available, so the rabbits are more likely to take the bait. It says on the label, but you need to collect all of your dead rabbits that you find that have succumbed to the bait to reduce your off-target damage. And a really important point here that I've highlighted in red must be followed up by warren collapsing and ripping. So you can basically bait every year for the rest of your life and you're still going to have rabbits unless you've addressed the source of the problem, which is the warren. And you need an ACUP and 1080 license if you're using 1080. So that's what we did back at this site of Whistler Lane, the one that I showed you with all of the dots. So we had our bait layer attached to the back of the car here. We dragged that all around the site. As you can see, it's really, really dry here. So we had really good uptake of bait. And then this right-hand photo is when we came back the next morning. And obviously there's a bunny here that's succumbed to the bait there. So fumigation is another form of population reduction. It's a bit more specific than baiting, and the reason I say that is that you're directly targeting the warren and the rabbits inside the warren. So if you don't know how this works, this machine here is a smoker. So this is just blowing a white smoke down the warren to see where it's all connected. Basically, you plug up the holes, you put a little tablet of phostoxin down with some water that creates a gas inside the warren and will kill all of the rabbits inside there. So the benefit of this over baiting is it's good in hard to access areas like the one in this photo, pretty quick per warren. It is best to undertake it between April and October, so you're offsetting that peak breeding season. But again, with these population reduction methods, it always comes back to the warren collapsing and ripping. Are you going to follow it up with that? Because if you're not, you're basically just wasting your time. The rabbits will bounce back really quickly. And to purchase your phostoxin, you do need an ACUP license.
Yeah. Aaron, just while you're there, I've got a couple of questions popping up in the chat function. So one of those is, can you just elaborate a bit on the non-target species that can be impacted if you don't clean up?
Yeah, absolutely.
And also some more photos on the exclusion cages, if you don't mind.
Sorry, what was that about the exclusion cages?
Just if you have some more photos of those available to share.
I do. I'd be able to provide them to you as well. So with your off-target, the main thing is that on your Pindone, on the label, it says that you can't use it anywhere where there's native rats, bandicoots, that type of thing. So that's really important that you're not doing that. So that's where fumigation can be useful, where you can't use bait. But that specific sort of plot where we had that exclusion, that was where we didn't have bandicoots, but we had wallabies. So it was more about excluding them from eating the bait. Does that sort of answer your question?
I think so. Caroline, did that help answer what you wanted to know?
I'm concerned a bit more about like owls and birds of prey and
so it depends on the bait that you use. So I might, after I've gone through this, I might find that other slide that I've got that has the difference between Pindone and 1080. So that'd be a good one to explain that. So I'll bring that up at the end. Cool. Okay, so we are talking still about fumigation. So here's an example of that. So on the left-hand side, we have the smoker, which is set up behind me, and we can see the smoke that's coming out where it's all connected here. And on the right-hand side, this is actually the Bass Highway. So we've got the smoker down here on the right-hand side, and we've got some smoke popping out right near the highway. So sort of gives you an example of where rabbits will build their warrens, and the only thing that's stopping them from going further is the road itself. So shooting is the last method of population reduction I'm going to talk about. So it's really good as a method post-control after you've destroyed the warren, tackle those rabbits that weren't inside the warrens when you were doing it. So it's an early night or opportune times. If you have thermal gear, that's really useful as well. You can do this any time of year. You can use dogs to increase your effectiveness. And obviously you've got to do this safely and with permission from landholders. So this photo up in the top right-hand corner, I thought was really funny. So we've done a good job. We've gone out and we've shot about a dozen rabbits here. But you can see behind, there's an active warren here that presumably we've done nothing about. So this is really good. We've reduced the population, but we're not addressing the source of the problem, which is back here. So moving on to ripping and collapsing warrens. This is the most effective method for long-term control. You can do this at any time of year. It destroys the entire warren systems, essentially putting the rabbits back to square one. So this is really good because these big warrens that we see where we have a multitude of entrances, I've got a photo of one coming up, but we're talking about years or decades of rabbits just digging away to reach this level. So by taking that away from them in one go, it's really, really good. This can be done with a trained operator. The operator of this machine here, we trained him up from scratch. It didn't take very long, and we consider him a professional now. So it can be pretty expensive, but it is good bang for buck on properties with a lot of warrens. The only issues we run into with using an excavator is you can have problems with access and sensitive vegetation as well. So whether you can get the machine in there or not. Otherwise, you can do it by hand, but it is quite a process. So I've got a little video here of in between this fence line, so you can see the tine has no issue getting in between there. This particular one has a knuckle on it, so you can see that he's wiggling around the tine to get in and destroy the warren. It's a bit hard to see, but we do have a spotter behind the machine here who's explaining where to go with the tine. So the general recommendation is that you go about 4 meters each direction from an active rabbit hole, and the warrens can be as deep as the water table. So it's important to know that before you start this process. So here's an example back at our site at Whistler Lane. So this is a pretty monster warren on both sides of the fence. So we ripped both sides. And here's a before and after. So left-hand side is basically like Swiss cheese. Went all the way along past the gate in the background there, and here's after. So this is after we've ripped it and we've track rolled it as well to crush it all down. So the last method I'm going to talk about is rabbit-proof fencing. So this is essential for rabbit eradication. So this is basically stopping rabbits from the landscape coming into a site. With this top photo, it's worth noting that in retrospect, this one probably should have been a bit higher. But basically how it works is when this gate's shut and it's latched, they can't get underneath, they can't get over, and they can't get through. So it has a skirt on it to stop them digging under. That's why we don't go straight into the ground. This can be done for asset protection, planting areas, housing, etc. So you can see, I don't know how well you can see this bottom left photo, but that's protecting the boundary of a property. And on the right, we were protecting the house itself. So you can pretty much tailor it to any situation. It can be expensive because the materials that we use are pretty strong. We don't recommend using your chicken wire because it's quite thin. It can rust out and the rabbits can bite through it, and the aperture or the hole is too big. This is what to look for if you have a property and you're concerned. Sorry, we've got a question from Carolyn. How wide does the skirt need to be? Perfect question. So the skirt that comes out along the ground needs to be at least 300 mil, and the height needs to be at least 900 mil. So If you want to have it the maximum strength, you go up to 1200 mil up and 300 mil out. But the minimum recommendation I would recommend would be a 300 mil skirt and 900 mil up. So in total, you'd be buying a 1200 mil length of wire. Good question.
Thanks, Aaron. The reason I asked that is we have a group locally who is putting in skirts, but they've also reported rabbits scaling fences of that height and higher. So it's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. So if you have a property and you're concerned about rabbits, these are, I suppose, some warning signs here. So on the left, it's a little hard to see, but there's a few holes underneath this house. I always say the one place you don't want the rabbit is underneath your house, because that can cause all kinds of issues. I've seen them actually burrow underneath stumps of houses in sandy soil. So obviously under your concrete slabs, and then here where this person's tried to stop them getting in with bricks and they've just dug straight under. So a few solutions to these types of problems is you can rabbit proof on the left-hand side. So this is rabbit proofing a house where they were getting under a raised house. In the middle, we've built a rabbit proof fence to protect the planting area. And on the right-hand side, we're just protecting an entire house where they're coming in from next door. So again, this isn't really solving the problem because you're just pushing the rabbits elsewhere, but it is a step in the right direction. So I'll leave you with this one. This is basically it for me, but this is sort of a bit of a diagram about when is the best time to use each of these techniques. But yeah, that's basically it for me.
Thank you, Aaron. That's fantastic, and I suspect there'll be a few people wanting to get their hands on that calendar there. And we will ask you all if you're happy for us to share your presentations, not only with the video but as a slide deck as well for folks who are wondering that. Does anybody have any questions for Aaron?
Just before you move off, Joe, on that slide that Aaron just showed, that's available on the vran.com.au site.
Oh, brilliant.
Along with a whole lot of other resources. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Neil.
And whilst I have the microphone, Aaron's very strongly made the point of that you must destroy the burrows. And the reason for that is that's where the rabbits breed. And if you can see, Tim is probably nodding his head right now. Without that, they have almost zero chance of being able to breed. And that's the essence of it. You've got to stop them breeding. And that's why you're destroying the burrows.
For those of us who are on maybe sensitive sites where ripping is not an option because of the soil disturbance, and I'm thinking cultural sites, but also other sensitive species, what is the other alternative? Is there any?
Want to answer that one, Aaron?
Yeah, this is a good question. So we had a particular site, this was down at Coronella, where there was an exposed midden due to erosion. So this was a big shell midden. So we contacted our local RAP group, so Bunurong Land Council. They came down, they had a look. They asked what we wanted to do, and what we wanted to do was to fumigate this warren that was inside the shell midden. And they agreed with us, saying that if we left the rabbits there, that it would just continue to erode and to accelerate the damage. So we're able to fumigate that one. So sometimes it is just about asking the right question to the right people, and sort of making your case that way.
Yeah. Sounds like the lesser evil is getting rid of them.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks. The other side of that also is that if you've got a hard place to access, then implosion is an option where small amounts of explosive are put into the burrow, and the implosion then collapses the burrow. And it's very effective as well. It's a little bit more costly than using a ripper across the landscape, but it is very, very effective in its achieving success. And that's how I got rid of the last couple of burrows on my land. I have 700 acres, thanks to Brad and Tim doing that implosion for me. So implosion's an option. Whether it's an option in culturally sensitive sites remains to be seen. Depends on the group and what they want.
Yeah, so on that, Neil, we have used implosion in culturally sensitive areas in combination with the local RAP, and that's been quite successful. It's also a very useful method amongst trees as well. You won't knock any trees out with implosion methods, but it is an adjunct to your ripping program. It's an add-on to ensure that the last burrows are removed.
Thank you for that, gentlemen. I think that informed consent and contacting the right people to ask permission before you go ahead is a really good point to bring into this conversation, considering that burrow destruction is obviously the key to getting and dropping the local populations. Does anyone else have any questions for Aaron and Neil and Tim at this point?
Can I just chime in again?
Sure,
as I'm known to do. Just as a case in point about the supporting populations of other predators like cats and foxes, when we bought our place in 1983, it was just totally overrun by rabbits to the tune of 2,500 pair being caught in 3 weeks, would you believe? We've undertaken large scale, not just on our property, but across the community. And our lambing percentages went from about 70% in those mid-80s up to near to 100 and over 100, simply because we got rid of the rabbits, which then meant the fox numbers crashed. Of course, foxes are one of the main predators of lambs. So there is my scenario about the research that shows just that.
Tyson, did you have a question?
Certainly.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the rhodinator, but you guys spoke about the implosion.
Yeah, may I say about the rhodinator, and that is, one, it's not approved in Victoria for use through the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. And the other thing is there is no real evidence that it collapses the burrow as is said to be claimed. Tim, have you got anything to add to that, or Aaron?
Yeah, so in most soils, the rhodinators will not collapse the burrow system, and so it's effectively a fairly expensive fumigation method. In collapsing the burrow system, that's what changes the dynamic, because it doesn't allow rabbits to have successful breeding in that burrow system. In other words, the young survive because of the burrow. Rhodinators, I see as a limited use as a follow-up. And it's just far more effective to use the methods of baiting, burrow destruction, and follow-up fumigation.
Thank you for that. Just going back to Neil's point with the collapse of fox populations with rabbit control, we've had conversations beyond this webinar also that if you are looking at undertaking rabbit control, it's worth looking at concurrent cat and fox control, particularly if you've got lots of native habitat around, because they will switch prey, obviously, with rabbits disappearing. Just wanted to share that point too.
With foxes, you do tend to see a reduction in their overall numbers, because young foxes, and being 40 to 60% of their diet, they really put a lot of pressure on rabbits, and when rabbits are removed, there's a reduction in fox numbers overall. So they're not as good at prey switching as one might reasonably have thought. They've still got to be able to catch that prey to do it. So I've also seen those sort of reductions of fox numbers when you have very significant reductions in rabbits.
Cool, thank you for that, Tim. Does anyone else have any questions for Aaron before we move on to Neil, who will be sharing a little more?
You have a question about owls and poison earlier. Was that something what was that question again?
Caroline?
Yeah, just concerned about the secondary effect that poisons have. So, I have quite a a big issue with rats getting under the bonnet of my car and chewing everything that they can. So I just leave the bonnet up, but I don't want to use like rat baits because of the possible secondary. And I just wondered about that because you touched on having to, you know, collect the dead afterwards. So what's that?
So in the relation with rabbit, and I assume you're talking about secondary poisoning. So it depends, first of all, on what you're using, but to reduce the primary poisoning, so the oats are dyed a green color, so that's to be a less appetizing color for birds, which are usually going for that orange and red ripe fruit color. So also the poison is put onto the outside of the oat, which is usually stripped off by birds as well. But if you're worried about your off target, what we usually do is we put the bait out in the late afternoon, and then we're back early morning, so that it's basically you're just targeting those rabbits overnight feeding, and then you're removing all of the carcasses that you can in the morning. If you're worried about owls specifically that are sort of more feeding overnight, you might switch that and do it during the day and then pick up all the carcasses before they're around at night time. But again, usually before we do any baiting program, we do a free feed. So it's basically looks exactly like the poison, but it's not poisoned. So we put this out. You can put cameras, which we do, and you can see what else is investigating it. And generally, if it's anything that's not a rabbit eating it, we're going to move that station somewhere else, or we're just going to rethink what we're doing there. Because even if it's an animal that's not going to be susceptible to dying of the bait, it's not a rabbit eating the bait, so it's a waste of bait. So this is why in some sites we've had to do quite a prolonged free feed to make sure that we're reducing all of these impacts. And the benefit of that is you're training the rabbits to come to that spot and eat the bait as well, so you can increase your effectiveness that way.
Tim, would you talk about the third generation pindone versus rat bait, please?
Me?
Yes, Tim.
Oh,
Tim.
right. Okay, sorry. I was drifting off there. I was thinking.
I saw you were drifting.
So pindone is going to be. It simply has significantly. It doesn't have accumulation effects that you find with those second generation anticoagulants. So the ones that you can, the poison baits that you can buy off the shelf for rats and mice are the major issue in regard to secondary poisoning for owls and raptors. So pindone isn't one of those, and it doesn't have that same effect at all. And so you can conduct those baiting programs fairly safely in the presence of raptors. But taking all the precautions that Aaron has pointed out, then reduce the opportunity for any other non-target uptake.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, guys. That's brilliant information. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. And in the interest of keeping to time, we might move on now to Neil and ask you to share your presentation, which I believe is going into a little more detail about some of these management options that we've been discussing.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. Joe, just got to get it set up here now for us. Okie dokie. All right, so you'll notice that I've got here the heading that it's other techniques and that they're supplementary to effective rabbit management. There are a whole lot of myths and legends about what goes on with regard to rabbit management in general, but about these other techniques that I'm going to talk about as well. One of the myths and legends that I hope we've just cleared up, Caroline, is about rat bait. Everybody chucks rat bait around everywhere and don't even think about it. And then they complain about or are concerned about the use of pindone. So as Tim's explained, they're completely different issues. And as has been stressed many times before, We who are licensed to use Pindone do it properly. Those of us in the population who chuck rat bait around willy-nilly are not really doing the best thing for their environment. So a rat trap can be a very effective tool. All right, so it's been said, but as that says there, the rabbit's home is its burrow, and without it, not only are they cactus, but so are the future generations, because they simply cannot breed. So having said what Aaron said, and the major focus there is on destruction of burrows, you must monitor, you must follow up that burrow work. So here's an example where a rabbit has dug out of a burrow, and in this case, the ripping was compromised because the slope that that burrow was ripped on was so steep that I could hardly stand up. So I can tell it's a dig out simply because the hole is a little pop hole. It's just like a hole in a handkerchief, as opposed to this one where it's a dig in, and that's from the outside. You can tell that by the rabbit scratches towards the outside, which also has an indication about how many rabbits remained in that particular area after the baiting had been done and then the ripping followed up. So if there hadn't been rabbits there, that was less likely to have occurred. In both instances, we went back and we followed up with fumigation, but those two burrows that have been reopened there, we actually just blocked them up. The top one, I dropped the rock down the hole, and I do have a slide that shows a full length of a shovel handle down that hole to show you how deep it was. And the other one I simply blocked up and came back the next day. So on that particular landholder's land, those burrows are still closed. So rabbit harbour, in other words, stuff that protects rabbits to give them time to dig a burrow, are things like that, which just about everybody has if they've got a wood-fired heating system. It's wood heaps. So wood heaps are a major problem in a breeding site. They provide cover for the rabbit to get time to dig the burrow. So does old building material, like that's a deserted set of farm buildings that haven't been cleaned up. And I must admit, it's been cleaned up since then. And this is that same property, in fact, where, as you can see, the rabbits have made use of the swimming pool, not for the design purpose, but simply to provide them with protection again from birds of prey or anything else that might get them whilst they're trying to dig a burrow. And then, of course, we've got the woody weeds situation where you've got blackberry, could be inkweed, could be gorse, could be any of those things, which are pest weeds anyway and need to be managed and controlled. But classically, if you've got blackberries, you've probably got rabbits there as well. And this photo shows exactly that, where the scratching there in front of the blackberry bush, which has been partly sprayed, by the way, has harboured the rabbits to give them time to build their burrows. Now, as a part of follow-up, as Aaron said, you can use dogs, and dogs create their own little issues around prevention of cruelty to animals. However, if you use dogs like beagles, for example, they can be used to locate the burrows. So in the first instance, it can help you actually find the burrows to map them to destroy them. But secondly, after you've done your program of ripping, if there are any that you missed, your dogs prowling around will pick up the scent of a rabbit and take you to that particular burrow. They can be used to chase rabbits, as Aaron talked about as well, so that shooters can actually pick them off during the daytime. And as I say, the dogs can flush them out of their hidey holes so that they're more easily shot. Otherwise, you're just walking around hoping to see the rabbit sitting there waiting for you to have a go at it. But the dogs will flush them. The shooting itself, in my experience, and Tim or Aaron, you can possibly back this up, but in my experience, whenever we've done any ripping, immediately after that, you go around with a spotlight and you'll pick up the rabbits because they won't know where to go. They're much easier to get. And these are the last remaining ones after the baiting's occurred. So I've had our 95+% knockdown. We've ripped the burrows, and now we're trying to pick up the one or two that remain because they are the ones that are going to breed. The dead ones can't do that, of course, but every one that remains is another rabbit that can breed breed the next generation. And I do have to acknowledge the fact that that photo was in October 1995 Australian Geographic, taken by Bill Backman when he did a Landcare article for my Landcare network in Uriah, actually. The next one, I thank Tim for putting me onto this one, but you can shoot rabbits in the daytime too. And that's what it might have looked like back in the day when, Tim, I reckon there'd be a heck of a lot of rabbits around if you went out chasing them with horses like that. But that's up in the high country, that particular photo. Again, these days you use it as follow-up. It's not a method of control. Killing rabbits is not controlling rabbits, as these photos show. And again, Tim, thanks for the photo. There's a catch back in what, the turn of the end of the 19th century, the 1800s, that would be. And that was good fun for a start, but it was also staple meat and fur and stuff for people to make money from. So it was an economic enterprise in those days. And it looks a bit different these days, but you can do this too. And this photo was taken up around Deniliquin, Jerilderie area. I think there are 350 pair there in a night's shopping, and there's 500 odd pair in that particular place, which is just down the road from the previous photo. And so we can go on doing that forever. So shooting rabbits, spotlighting, the stuff that Tim and I used to do when we're young fellas, it just don't work because the rabbits keep breeding. So it's not just a matter of that being a measure of success. It's not, because in fact, this is failure. And I'm just paraphrasing Tim here. This is not success. This is absolute failure, that you can keep catching this many rabbits 120, 30, 40 years down the track. We've been doing the same thing for many, many years. So ferreting, for those of you who don't know ferreting, again, Bill Backman's photo. The burrow has many holes. Those holes, you put nets over them. As you can see here in the background, there's a net which the rabbit pops out into. The net contracts with a string around it. And so it's like having them in a string shopping basket. And to encourage the little blighters to come out, we have our ferret, which we put down the rabbit burrow and wait for the ferret to be flushing the rabbit out, so they're getting caught in the net like that. Now, again, this is very labor intensive. You'd be lucky to do 20 rabbit burrows a day ferreting, given my prior experience. There's nothing worse than being sitting there in the cold for 3 hours waiting for the ferret to wake up after it's been inside having a feast. And also there's no guarantee that you're going to get all of the rabbits out of there, because rabbits are well known for getting to the end of the burrow, putting their back to the ferret, and there's no way that the ferret's going to be able to flush them out. So ferreting is an option. It can be used under houses. It can be used in that sort of situation, but by no means is it a way of controlling rabbits, because none of us can control rabbits. The only thing we can do is manage them, and the best way to do that is to destroy their burrows to interfere with the breeding cycle. So long netting, interestingly, we had an application quite a few years ago from a group down East Gippsland Way who wanted to demonstrate long netting as a means of control, inverted commas, no such thing as control, where you put nets up around an area and then you try to flush the rabbits into that net, and they get caught like in a fishing net, like so. And then, of course, you have to knock the rabbit off in the most humane possible way. Now, I witnessed one of these sorts of things happening up at near Wodonga when I did a session up there just recently, and they were using ferrets to flush the rabbits out of the burrows. But of course, in the burrow were kittens, so all the kittens were doing was jumping out one hole and running back in another hole and not going to the long net. So it was just a circus to see this happening. It was fun from the observer's point of view, but it wasn't doing much to manage rabbit numbers. Rabbit-proof netting, well, fencing. Aaron's covered that well. He said what you need to do, and part of that is using rabbit-proof fencing with the right qualifications. For example, that mesh size, 30mm mesh is best. If you go to 40, kittens can get through it. Anything bigger than that, anything could walk through it. And the specifications you'll see on that roll of netting there, as was said, it is very expensive. I did a rough costing the other day. It costs about $10 per metre before you start getting somebody to put it up or put it up yourself. So it's a very expensive way of doing it. And on our properties, which used to have rabbit-proof fencing, we don't do that anymore because there's so much damage to them through kangaroos, deer, wombats, wallabies, echidnas, that there's no such thing as a rabbit-proof fence in broad acres anymore. So they have to be properly constructed, and Aaron talked about that very well. They have to be inspected regularly. So if you're going to have a small block that you're going to have exclusion fencing on, unless you inspect it regularly, you're doomed for disaster because there's bound to be rabbits from the outside trying to get in. Gateways have to be secure, and as Aaron spoke about, you have to have netting everywhere across the gate itself. And here's an example where there's a little flap of netting being added to the edge of the gate here so that it covers the gap between the gate post and the gate. And then the same thing down at the other end where the hinge is and underneath as well. And then here's the most fallible of all of the things about fencing is gates need to be kept closed, because so often people will walk through a gate, I'll be back in 10 minutes. Guess who's on the prowl? And that's the rabbit who's going to get in there in 10 minutes that you're not looking. So gates have to be constantly kept closed. Now, some failed fencing. As I said, very expensive. This particular property, that was around Emerald, thereabouts, and the people had done the right thing. They had their whole block fenced out, but they hadn't been aware of the fact that the mesh size was important, and even an adult rabbit can get through that. So that failed simply because of the size of the mesh. This one, that's failed because the skirt, whilst it's there, it's on the wrong side. It's on the inside where there aren't rabbits compared to the outside where the rabbits are coming from. So you can see what's happened there. The rabbits have simply dug underneath, whereas if the skirt had been on the wrong side, they'd come up, put their nose against the vertical wire, started to try to scratch, and then given up and gone away. Whereas in this case, they've gone up to the fence, put their nose up against the fence, and then started digging underneath, and away we go. They can get through just like digging a burrow. And again, there's a gate. One, the mesh on the gate's too big, and two, whilst they put a plinth underneath to stop the rabbits getting underneath, any rabbit could walk in through that gap there, even at a run. And then, as Aaron said too, if you've got material that's too light, there is a classic example of where rabbits have actually chewed through the wire netting. The person who did that was trying to make sure that the animals and things underneath that log could still survive, but then the rabbits made short work of chewing through the netting. Trapping rabbits, an interesting one. There are cage traps that look like this. Now, Tim, I want you to look at this photo because, and Aaron too, I am yet to see a rabbit caught in a run-through trap like that. Have you seen it?
Fascinatingly, I have seen a rabbit caught in one of those.
Yeah.
But I know of hundreds of them being deployed for many hours of deployment. It's really, the rabbit has no choice. It's a there's no other exit. That's the only way it can work.
Yeah.
But I've seen places where rabbits dug around them.
Yeah.
And it's mostly ineffective.
Yeah. So the idea is you put that open funnel to the right over here, up against a hole in the fence or their burrow, and you leave this end open for a while so they get accustomed to going through there. And then you block off this end, and hopefully the rabbits will come up. They can't back up, so they're caught in there. But like I said before, it's not a particularly successful thing except for the people selling them. The next type is just like the classic possum, cat trap, rabbit trap with a pedal on the bottom. You put the bait in there so the rabbit walks in. The rabbit steps on that plate, which pulls this lever down, which drops the door, and so your rabbit's in there. An example of a feral rabbit caught in the trap by that method. As you can see, one rabbit at a time, not multiple rabbits. But the person who caught this rabbit had seen the neighbour who had released their pet rabbits because they couldn't keep them anymore. You can see the difference in behaviour here. That rabbit had no worries about going in there to get the tucker because they're perfectly used to eating bait and seeing things that aren't normally in their landscape. It didn't stop that little rabbit from getting caught. And the interesting thing here was the person in question said, "I've never killed a rabbit before, but gee whiz, I did this time. I've learned something." So there are multiple issues about trapping rabbits like this, one of which is it comes to the bottom line, the rabbit has to be humanely disposed of. Leg hole traps. Well, there's the traps that Tim and I used to use when we were young. Used to use lots of them. Yes, they are cruel. They should not be used. They do damage to the leg. That's painful. Whereas if you use one of these traps, you'll note they are called soft jaw traps. They're also leg hole traps. The idea is the rabbit stands on that plate, which releases that latch there. That then shuts closed. And one of the things that I do or we do when we're demonstrating them is you can actually put your hand in there, spring the trap on your own finger, and it doesn't hurt, but it does stop you from getting away. So they're leg hole traps. And again, you must know what you're doing to use them. You've got to understand rabbit behavior. You've got to know where to set them for that to be successful. But again, unless you got 300 or 400 traps like Tim and I used to have, then you'd only be catching 1 or 2 rabbits. It's follow-up stuff. Biocontrol, we've talked about that. There's an example of a rabbit that's died from myxomatosis, which is still definitely active out there. And I venture to say that it seems to be more active in recent years than it has been in some prior years. As Ina talked about, it's fleas and mosquitoes that spread the myxovirus. So when it's the conditions are right, it will have an impact on rabbit populations. And like with RHDV, it's helping to maintain the lower numbers of rabbits. It's not the silver bullet, as was mentioned. It's one of the tools that we can use, like everything else that I've just been talking about. Notice the vector there. There's the fly, which has helped to spread the virus. One thing that Ina didn't mention that I will mention at this point is there is a thing called gene drive, which I won't go into at the moment, but basically it's selective breeding to produce more males to have an impact on the breeding capacity of populations. Joe, that'll be something that might be worth following up for people later on. But just to reinforce my message, Tim's message, Aaron's message, Ina's message, effective rabbit management is about stopping breeding. And as you can read there, killing rabbits is just one of the ways to do it. And exclusion simply shifts the problem elsewhere. So you can get from the tone in my voice, perhaps, and also the words that I've spoken, that those things that we think classically are methods of control are not. They are simply follow-up strategies that we use for the actual rabbit recipe, which is the effective thing, which essentially is destroy the burrows.
Thorough presentations. Thank you very much, gentlemen. If you do have questions for Tim, Neil, or Aaron, please pop them in the chat function while we move on to the next speaker. We have Heidi from Centre for Invasive Species Solutions joining us next. She is the National Rabbit Coordinator, and she will be taking you some of the resources available to help you with your management programs. Thanks.
Hi everyone, how you going? Just going to share my screen with you. Okay, thanks guys. Thanks for everyone for coming along today to learn more information to help you on your rabbit journey. I'm just going to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land in which I'm presenting from today, which is the Dja Dja people, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Today, I'm actually going to talk about my national coordinator role, and then I'm going to duck into the digital tools available that you can use today. There's a lot of free resources out there which are designed to help you learn more about rabbit work, and these have been created by experts who have spent decades researching, trialing and testing control techniques in the paddock, and they've made all the mistakes and shared with us what works and what doesn't, so we can translate this information into websites, fact sheets, apps and videos. I guess you've learnt from today that rabbit management does require some level of expertise, and I think you can save your time and money if you take the time to explore and learn the steps involved in rabbit management. You can see that the tools that I'm going to share with you today, some of them are really basic for those at the beginning of their rabbit journey, but some of them are a little bit more advanced for those who have the basics and have field experience. But I promise that there's something here for everyone. So just a little bit about my role. I'm one of 5 national coordinators that have been appointed to help people better manage the 6 pest species that are having a devastating impact on our Australian landscape. And these include feral pigs, wild dog, feral cats and foxes, feral deer and rabbits. Yeah, we all work very, very similarly, and we all have very similar work plans, but we're available to help you on your journey with pest management. It's been a little while since we've had a national feral rabbit coordinator, and to me this role is really an important one as it highlights the serious issue that rabbits play in Australia. And my main aim is to help people better manage rabbits and reduce their negative impacts on our unique landscapes, our agriculture, our cultural heritage, our community assets, and also our well-being. So rabbits impact everyone, everywhere, every day. And we've put together a 5 goal work plan to help us build a movement for rabbit action. I won't spend too long on these goals, but I guess the first one is all about raising awareness about the rabbit issue, which thanks to Joe and Caroline and the team and the presenters speaking to me beforehand are doing the same. We're trying to talk to as many people as possible in the community about how serious the rabbit issue is and what you can do about the rabbit problem, and motivate people to take action. We're also trying to increase capacity so people don't know what they don't know, and it's really important that people understand what's involved in a rabbit program, and that the information that they're looking for is easy to find and easy to understand. My next goal is all about improving our national standards. So I'm working with key stakeholders to review our nationally agreed codes of conduct or code of practice and our standard operating procedures. And these are really important, so we ensure that all our rabbit programs are done effectively and humanely. The last 2 goals. So I'm also looking at building partnerships. So it's really important when you're doing pest management that you work in collaboration with others. A lot of programs are delivered in silos. So my role is to help connect people working in the system to work with other people working in the system. And my 5th goal is all about protecting important assets. We know that rabbit programs and funding for rabbit programs are often linked to threatened species and important places in our landscapes. So I'm ensuring that people working on those projects are considering rabbit management in their land management practices. And I guess my personal goal is just to listen to people and who are working in the rabbit system, what they have to say about the rabbit problem, and learn what tools they might need to make a difference. Now, there's a lot of information out there when you type in rabbit control into Google or your search engine. And I wanted to speak about 5 websites that provide you advice and can help you get underway in rabbit management. I've mainly included state and national sites, but I should also mention that your local government and landcare groups have great resources available, and also our federal government websites also have some valuable content as well. The first one I'm going to kick off with is the Victorian Rabbit Action Network. So shout out to Aaron, Neil and Tim. They've created some great content and several videos for land managers working on farms, lifestyle blocks and large reserves. They've got a collection of videos that are free to download on their VRAN website or YouTube channel. And they've also got some videos on their leadership programs. So I'd encourage you to check them out. There's also videos on Agriculture Victoria. They've got some great videos and these are free to download on YouTube as well. These are the most up-to-date ones that they've only just been made a year or two ago. They're really easy to watch and they cover the basics on rabbit management tools and as well as monitoring. The Pest Smart videos are available on the Centre for Invasive Species YouTube channel and also Pest Smart website. These are a great video series on rabbit control and they're also free to download. The Centre also have rabbit webinars and presentations from pest vertebrate conferences if you'd like to understand or learn more about the science behind rabbit management. So you can take your pick from whatever presenter you prefer from those 3 channels or watch all 3. Next, I thought I'd mention the Rabbit Free Australia website. This also contains pages of information on rabbits, rabbit control. There really is something here for everyone from rabbit control, so to help you assess, plan, and manage and improve your program. But there's also a lot of scientific rabbit research data here. I'd highly recommend that you check out the homepage and then click on the latest news. So the Rabbit Free Australia team have worked with many researchers to develop content, in particular fact sheets, and you'll find even in the latest news page how to optimize RHDVK5. If you become a member of this group, you'll also receive a fantastic newsletter, and they also have a bookshop where you can buy children and adult books such as those wild rabbits. The Pest Smart website covers lots of information, and this is a good website for beginners right through to those ones more advanced. There's several pest vertebrate species covered on this web page, and they host training videos, glove box guides, national plans, reports, and national standards. I guess it's really a great tool for those working on project management, maybe in a local government area or a catchment management authority. You'll find information on rabbits if you click on this, the top toolbar, management toolkits, and then you search for rabbits or you click on the rabbit image. Once you do that, you'll find this landing page which contains all the information on rabbits for land managers. It talks about the impacts, it's got some how-to advice, it's got the latest research, and it's also got policies and legislation. You'll see that the page is split in half, and so it's got some content all about rabbit ecology and biology, and then it's also got management resources, and these plan, manage, and improve are all drop-down boxes that you can click on and get more information. Across the top, there are other pathways on the toolbar. So there's information on domestic animal safety. There's also links to help you connect to your state jurisdictions. And there's also case studies for engagement and a handy tool to link you to feral scan. If you scroll down on that page I was just on, you'll also find the most popular tool, which is the glove box guide. And this is a quick and easy digestible read that will help you get started into understanding rabbit management. This is a free download as a PDF, or if you work for an organisation or community group, you may like to order a print run and you can print these off and co-brand them with your logo. It's a really great tool and one that is truly just a go-to reference that you can have on your desk or in your car. For national standard information, for those working on rabbit programs who want guidance on how to do rabbit management effectively and humanely, this site's really for you. So we've got National Standard Operating Procedures, or NatSops. And these are written in a way that describes all the procedures involved in rabbit control, and they also address the animal welfare issues applicable to each control. These are detailed and are really good for those who are working with contractors who are about to undertake rabbit control on your behalf. Okay, moving on to Rabbit Scan and Feral Scan. So Rabbit Scan is part of the Feral Scan family, and it's a purpose-built free community resource which anyone can use to record pest animals in their local area and the management of pest animals in their local area. It's a web base, or you can also use an app. And if you click on the rabbit on this home page, it will take you to the Rabbit Scan page. It's really a great a digital tool for landholders, landcare groups and community groups, local councils, or even yourself. It's been co-designed by landholders and community groups, and it's really easy to use. And you can use the Rabbit Scan to record your rabbit activity, such as sightings and warrens, the damage that rabbits are causing, rabbit control activities that you might be undertaking, and you can also record whether you found a diseased rabbit. I'm going to quickly show you how easy it is to use the Rabbit Scan app. And this is if you've downloaded the app from wherever you get your local apps from. It's a free app, and then you just simply install it onto your mobile and follow the prompts. So once it's installed on your phone, it can be used with or without mobile reception. So simply open the app, select, say, rabbits as your species, and select the information that you'd like to record. And for this one, we're just going to record a sighting of rabbits. And then from there, you'd enter the date, and then the app will automatically try and calculate your location. And once your location's been determined, then you can simply just answer all the questions in the form and submit your record. Now, your record and any photos that you might like to add will be stored in a secured Feral Scan database, and it will be made available to view on the Feral Scan map by yourself and others, and you can either make it public or protected, or private, public or private. And you can then share this data with your neighbours, work colleagues and landcare or local councils. And it's a really great way to map the rabbits and help you collaborate on a rabbit program. So you'd be able to showcase how big the rabbit issue is. And you might even be able to, if you work for an organisation or group, leverage action or investment into the rabbit program. All the records are managed responsibly by Feral Scan, and the records are also viewed by government agencies. So this is a really important citizen science database that helps government look at the rabbit issue. And I really strongly encourage you, if you're going to do something today, to download the app and start recording the rabbit issues in your area. If you need some help using the app, there's some really great tutorials on the website and the Centre for Invasive Species Solutions YouTube channel. And we also have a dedicated coordinator. So the Rabbit Scan tool was developed with the idea that it would be supported by staff. So help isn't too far away. We've got Peter West, who I think might be joining us today, is a dedicated coordinator working on maintaining and updating the Feral Scan and Rabbit Scan apps, and he offers support to users. So his information can be found on the Rabbit Scan, Feral Scan webpage. And if you have any questions about the tool and how to use it, he's here to help. My final digital tool is is promoting the Feral Rabbit newsletter. So please take a moment to scan the QR code, and I'll also get Joe to share this again in the resources. So in my role, I've been working on designing a quarterly newsletter to offer best practice tips, raise awareness on the rabbit impacts, and showcase projects being delivered across Australia. I'm also including information on grant opportunities, conferences, and community events such as landcare events and VRAN events. So far, there's been a couple of additions, but if you've got content or would like to contribute to the newsletter, please let me know, because I really want to share what you're doing on rabbits in your local community. I just wanted to give a shout out to my my sponsors that helped me with the National Coordinator Program, and also the members of my steering committee, and wanted to thank you for your time today. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Heidi. That's fantastic. There's certainly a lot of good resources out there, and it'd be great if you are talking to others to share and pass on that information too. Does anyone have any? We've got time for probably 2 or 3 questions if anybody had any burning questions left from this morning's session.
Just happy to report that Pete is online, and
Yep.
And he's just commented to say that there is going to be an upgrade to the Feral Scan app, which will make the mapping of rabbit activity heaps easier. Pete, do you want to have a bit of a chat about that?
Thanks. You summarised it, but yeah, look, the Feral Scan resource, as Heidi very accurately described, is we want to make it really useful for communities and landholders and groups. And so it's a continuous work in progress, and we're always taking feedback. And one of the things we're keen to address is people's concern about managing information and data securely. So we're focusing heavily on that. And we're about to release an upgrade of the resource. So we're hoping to contribute in a positive way, as each of you have described today, all determined to make a positive impact with the management of rabbits. We're also wanting to support that and back that as much as possible, and motivate people to get involved in control programs and connect them to resources, and support them with accessing things to effectively manage rabbits. So our upgrade will be undertaken in the next month or so, and we'll be doing a staged rollout of that. So yeah, over the next 3 to 6 months, we'll have a few new innovations with the resource, and we're hoping it helps people around the country a great deal. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. And one thing I'd like to just add to what Pete said, and correct me if I'm wrong, Pete, on our last webinar, we were talking about the ability of users to download maps and reports on their management and sighting. So the Rabbit Scan app's a great way to keep records for your property and your neighbourhood.
Yeah, and if I can add a little bit there, we want to make it a really useful management tool. So for a lot of people, it's a recording platform for documenting and sharing reports, but we want to actually focus on making it a very effective management tool for people. So there's some changes to the website and the app that address that priority.
Brilliant. Thanks, Pete. Any last questions? Well, I've got one last request of everybody before you chuff off to get some lunch, but I'll just double check. Were there any other questions for today's presenters? I've got a new message popping up down here. Nope. Okay. Well, before you chuff off and get your lunch, I'm just popping in a link into the chat function. One of the things that we'd really appreciate from everybody here today is a little bit of feedback. This helps us report to our funders on what you gain from these sessions, but also helps us to apply for more funding to run sessions like this. And while you're doing that, I would love to thank each of you for attending today. It's great to see your support, and especially to the presenters that have shared their time and their knowledge and come online today to tell you all about rabbit management options. So thank you. Caroline, was there anything you wanted to add before we start saying farewell to people?
No, I think it's just another amazing webinar that we've been able to pull together with some wonderful presentations and information. I certainly learnt a lot, so I'm really grateful to everybody who came along, and yeah, look forward to next week's webinar on blackberries and weeds biocontrol as well. No doubt we'll all learn something new from that. And really a good idea to be able to keep in touch. Joe and I were chatting offline earlier about the information that we gathered from you all in regards to like when you registered. So like what sort of activities and the success rate of the activities that you have. And it would be great to know whether, you know, from if your approach to rabbit control changes after you've seen this webinar, and you know, in 6 months or 12 months time, then what was the efficacy of that approach? Did it work? You know, like it's all great that we sit around and chat about what the options are, but it'd be great to know that it's working. So we might touch base with you again in another 6 to 12 months. So stand by for that.
Thank you.
Good on you.
Thanks, David. Yes, we will be putting the webinar up on our website. I'm just seeing a couple last questions. So that we'll send an email out to you when they're live and ready for you to view. And Bradley, thank you. We'll also pop some of these great resources and links that you've been putting in the chat function in our follow-up email in case you've missed them while you've been watching today.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay, well, thanks, Jody. Thanks, Caroline. Well done.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks,
and Neil
Tim.
and Aaron and Heidi and Ina.
Thanks, Jody. Thanks, Carolyn. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks,
Cheers,
everyone.
Okay, so bye, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks for the opportunity. Have a great week, everyone.
Yeah.
You
Good
too.
on you,
Thanks,
Heidi.
Heidi.
Okay. See ya. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.